What are some of the fundamental trends that already were taking place that are going to happen now faster? And AI and automation would be examples of that. We went and looked at more than 300 trends that we have identified through our consulting work and did a pretty systematic look to say which of these trends has been catalyzed by the COVID-19 crisis, meaning it was already happening, but it's going to happen faster and the impact is going to be bigger, or it's been dislocated, which means it's going to be slower or the impact will be muted. The big theme that we found from doing this is, probably not surprisingly, digital migration is the big theme that really has been catalyzed by COVID-19. Again, a lot of these things were happening already, but they were happening underneath the surface. People were investing in automation, they were investing in AI, the technologies were getting better. But what's happened is mass experimentation has shown you can do things that people didn't think was possible, and the new needs that have emerged have mean that people have got to do even more. So it's very clear from the work that we've done that digital migration is going to happen faster, and automation, AI, and a whole bunch of related technologies that already we're going to have huge impact in 5 or 10 years are going to have that impact in 5 or 10 months. And this is something that if people are not ahead of, they're really going to regret it in the months ahead. Challenges that people have when they're making decisions through uncertainty is there's no data to guide them. So all they can do is do the best they can to rely on some of the beliefs they have or some of the assumptions that they're making. A topic like how much will remote work continue is a great example of this. We were working with one of our clients a couple weeks ago, a big European-based bank, and we had 40 of their top leaders together, and we asked them a question: what percent of your workforce will have more than 50% of its time spent working remotely in 2021, pretty near in time? The range was from 5% to 95%. Everybody was all over the map over the issue. So this is a really important thing for any leader that's thinking about a question like this through uncertainty. Try to understand the various perspectives about it. The person who said 5% had a set of assumptions they were making, that everybody would want to get back to work, that people would be able to figure out how to do it safely. The person at 95% said no one's going to want to come back to work. Everyone's going to be too scared. People have figured out the tools work, et cetera, et cetera. Nobody knows for sure. But when you're trying to make decisions about something like that, you have to understand what are the critical assumptions that would lead to this answer or lead to this answer. Then how do we either run an experiment so we can figure out what's more likely, or figure out the piece of data that we have to watch that suggests we're going to go in this direction or that direction. My own personal view on this question is we are going to indeed have a lot more people working remotely than we did before, because I think the mass experiment that was run in the first half of 2020 showed a lot of the assumptions we were making about productivity, about the ability to have communities, about the ability to work effectively away from an office were false. But I also don't think we're going to go all the way to everyone working remotely, because humans are humans and they like to gather and they like to spend time with people. And when you're working on creative sorts of challenges, you need the ability to be next to somebody and have those chance occurrences that so frequently lead to great solutions. Of course, I don't know for sure, but those are some of the assumptions that I make about the future of work. That we see lasting after the COVID-19 crisis is a dramatic transformation of healthcare. And some of this has happened by necessity during the crisis, but a lot of the things we think are going to stick. We have long made the case at Insight that healthcare needs to be disrupted in a classic Clayton Christensen sense, which means you've got lesser skilled people in less centralized location using technology to provide great care. Telemedicine would be a clear example of this, and there are a range of other things. You're now beginning to see this happen at pace and at scale because of COVID-19. The other thing that you're then going to see is there were underlying trends that suggested that personalized medicine, that prevention, that what our clients at Johnson & Johnson called disease interception is something that was going to be a big shift over the next decade. Because what's happening is we now have all these smart connected devices that are throwing off data. We now understand the human genome at a level that we never did before. And we have the power to process all of this information. Now, putting all of those pieces together to really do personalized healthcare, to really think not just about treatment, but how you have predictable prevention. That was a really difficult thing to do, but the forces were at work. They've been catalyzed by what's going on with COVID-19, and we predict you're going to see a dramatic acceleration of many of these things, which means much more data-driven healthcare, much more virtualization, much more work to prevent bad things from happening, so you don't have to do the hard work to treat when it's really too late to do anything about it. And companies like Johnson & Johnson that were investing in this a decade ago are really well positioned to ride this trend and have tremendously powerful impact for consumers all around the world. Fundamental principles that we have about any innovation is that you never listen to what customers say, because customers will tell you all sorts of things about something they've never experienced. They'll tell you they'll do something that they don't. They'll tell you they want something where they really won't. They'll tell you they won't do something that they actually will. What you do is you watch what happens when they actually use something. You watch what happens when they get a chance to try something. You watch what happens when they actually play with something. And I think data privacy is a very interesting example of this, because people will say all sorts of things. They'll say, no, I would never give up my data. No, I want to have all my data be completely under my control. No, I don't want anyone tracking my location, until it is a moment where that has big impact on how their life actually unfolds. Then it turns out in many cases, data privacy actually wasn't that big a deal to them. There was an academic article maybe about 10 years ago that ran an experiment that said people would basically give away every ounce of data about themselves for movie tickets once a month. So once they were put in the actual circumstance where they had to make the choice, what they said and what they did began to deviate. So I don't know for sure what will happen with data privacy, but I'm always a believer that you don't listen to what people say on any issue. You watch what they actually do. The revealed preferences are a much more reliable guide than the stated preferences, and we'll see. Two forms of silver lining for COVID-19. The first is a lot of the trends that have been catalyzed, that have been accelerated by COVID-19, they're very good things. It's going to enable the world to be more productive. It's going to enable the world to be entertained in different sorts of ways. It's going to enable greater diversity, greater inclusion, et cetera. So there's a lot of good things that will happen as those underlying trends have been catalyzed, as we do see transformation in healthcare, as we do see more digital migration. This is a good thing. The other thing that I think will be good is every crisis that we have ever seen, whether it's a political crisis, it's an economic crisis, it's some kind of macroeconomic event, it's a whatever, any sort of crisis that we have seen, there always are innovators who come in and take advantage of that moment to introduce new products and services that echo or reverb off what has happened and come up with something that makes the world a better place. Go back to the global financial crisis. The years 2007 to 2009 saw more than 100 companies that ultimately became called unicorns born. These are privately held companies worth more than $1 billion. Asset sharing platforms like Uber, like Airbnb, echoed right off the great financial crisis, where everybody's worried about their finances. Fine. You don't have to buy a car. You don't have to buy a place. You can go and ride share. You can house share, whatever. You also had Stripe and Square, some of the underpinnings of the modern financial system, formed just about at the same time. People are distrustful of traditional financial institutions. Fine. Innovators come up with new ways to handle finances in a different sort of way. You're going to see the exact same sort of thing here. Yes, of course, it is hard to start a business. It's hard to innovate in the middle of a crisis, but history speaks clearly on this point. There are tremendous silver linings for those who think and act in the right way, and you're going to see that happen in this crisis as well.